It's November 2015. The EDSAC looks deceptively complete in the gallery.
So this is the main power supply. This supplies power to all the racks for the whole of EDSAC.
Parts are working, but there's still a lot of integration and testing to be done.
So this is the clock pulse generator. Think of it as the conductor for the orchestra of EDSAC. It sends a signal that times everything to happen at the precise time. This is a buffer which just allows the signal to spread out. And then moving across to the adjacent rack, we have one of the 42 chassis 01s. These are the story generation units, so they drive the delay line storage. They keep recirculating the pattern until a new one is required or until somebody wants to read that pattern out. What we're doing with this chassis at the moment is we're making a number of passive measurements from the individual test points. These connect to various points in the circuit, and we're building a record of the readings we get, the voltage readings, so that when we come to troubleshoot the machine in future, we'll be able to just quickly read these and know whether there's a problem with that individual chassis or not. Donald, test point 1, 225 millivolts.
Volunteers like Don Kesterton come in frequently to get on with the job.
Test point 4, 417 millivolts. Test point 5, 16 volts exactly.
16.00. We've got to the point in commissioning the EDSAC that we're on the brink within a few months of having some interesting things to see, such as individual instructions being executed, some numbers counting perhaps, some real data in the memory as distinct from simulated data, because there's sufficient of the machine, although it's not complete yet, to start integrating various components, various units together.
Here are the 01 chassis. They're laid up, each rack has 4 01 chassis with the interface units which allow the memory unit to actually interface to the rest of the computer. We've actually got 42 of these chassis, 32 of which are used in this particular configuration. To allow us to test the chassis, we have these data generators which allow us to generate a bit pattern which is sent through the 01 chassis. We then recover it at this point, which will allow us to decide if the clamps, the amplifiers are working properly within the unit.
Most of the racks are populated, but there are significant gaps, especially the control and arithmetic units and the input and output devices. In Cambridge, Nigel Bennett has the arithmetic unit more or less complete, and it'll be moved to Bletchley pretty soon. And near Swindon, James BARR has the main control system ready.
On the EDSAC project, I've been responsible for design work for the order coding system and for the master control unit. These two systems consist of 12 chassis and 3 chassis respectively. We're trying to stick to the traditional language that was in use at the time, and Wilkes referred to them as orders. The modern terminology is instruction. The order coding chassis deal with the fact that in the memory of the computer, instructions are coded as a number consisting of 5 bits. This particular chassis is a register which stores 2 of the bits out of those 5. 1 bit is stored in one half of the chassis and the other bit is stored in the other half.
James, do you want to kind of kick off with the batch of questions you had?
The November workshop concentrates on the next stages of integration.
Your initial thoughts, and as main control, in some sense you are the source of all the control signals to everyone else, but it's their reply to those signals that clock you along. So
we've done most of the subsystem testing.
The challenge is joining up the various new parts of the machine, as data needs to be sent from one subsystem to another. In particular, how James BARR's order coding and main control unit will talk to Nigel Bennett's arithmetic unit.
Before I can plug anything in, that you need to be able to get something out of memory and send it to me, along with a control signal about what you'd like to do. Getting stuff from you and executing it getting something out of the accumulator and sending it back to you. Then if we can do that, we'll have established then it's worth going further on. But until we can do that basic stuff, then there's no point to go further.
So that could be restricted to just a few of your chassis?
1, 2, 3, 4.
Yes.
So that means the jump orders, any orders that effectively read from the store, we can test just off the engineer's hand switches.
Not a jump.
No, not a jump order.
That requires a lot more stuff. What I have in mind is when you read the accumulator.
Integrating EDSAC's obscure-sounding subsystems is a big challenge.
So if we have the engineer's switches...
The store instruction too, so the T and was it V, the two T instructions. They'll just take it from the accumulator back to you, back to store. It's a very simple instruction. But you won't be reading the accumulator, you'll be reading the multiplier, because I just feed it from the multiplier. I'm thinking the minimum number of chassis.
Which leads me back to, so memory, there's really two parts. There's the whole store addressing access and coincidence system. John, you've basically had that working for some time.
6 months ago, yeah.
Analog pulses need to arrive at exactly the right places at exactly the right times and at the right voltages, and a lot of this is unclear.
What I need to make progress on that is a statement of the voltage levels required by the panel of ones, right, for tank selection, and then set up the various voltage levels in the address decoding to correspond.
Let's pick that up as part of the general chassis 01.
The system depends on 1940s technology, all of it sourced by Alan Clarke.
Well, the container's a little bit emptier than when you were last here. We've now got about 80% of the chassis have been constructed and populated with their valves, although we're only in the early stages of commissioning. So what we have here is the last 20% of the valves and some for contingency and spares. The aim is to keep the machine running for about 25 years after we commission it, so we've got to have enough spare valves to take us through them, because by that time these valves will be even rarer than they are today. Many of the valves we have come in the original boxes, and some of these are dated to the early 1940s. So the idea is we're going to keep all these ones that have got some kind of interest to them. We'll not be reusing them, but they might make a nice giveaway for kids when they get involved in actually programming EDSAC when it's been finished and is running. So come down for a day, run their program, and we send them away with a genuine 1940s valve box and maybe a dead valve as well. This is one of the CRT tubes that we need for the display units, and it's actually in its old military transport box, which is made for wood for lightness, and it's got this spring suspension system inside it holding a canvas bag, so it could transport this very delicate instrument and possibly even airdrop it, and had to arrive at the other end completely unscathed. So this is typical of the tubes that were used for the display units. Ex-World War II, this particular model was one that was introduced, I think, in 1940, and was used in some of the very, very early airborne radar. So one of the operators in the plane would be looking at this and watching a trace going across it, and from that trying to figure out what was ahead, what other enemy aircraft were, and how far they were from them, and so on. Inside EDSAC, this is used for various purposes, but basically to display information that is in some of the memory locations and similar things to that. Chris has now got the first of those units working, which has got 3 of these tubes in it.
This is the unit which enables the programmer to have a look inside the EDSAC to see what the program is doing. A process called peeping by Maurice Wilkes in the old days.
Now numbers are being read, and here you see the numbers in the store changing as the calculation proceeds. These are all short numbers occupying half a word.
The middle screen is displaying the data that's in one of the tanks of the memory system. The way the engineers work at the moment, in order to know what they're doing, is to use an oscilloscope to see the waveforms in the computer. However, for long-term use of the machine, we also need the operators and the programmers to get access to that information, and it isn't appropriate to use oscilloscopes. We use a special display unit. There are 2 of these units, one for the main system and one for the arithmetic unit, and this display unit is the first one.
The actual project we're involved in at the moment is interfacing the O1 chassis with the display units which you saw this morning that Chris had shown. That consists of 3 oscilloscopes. It gives us the ability to look at each tank and actually decide whether the bit patterns are correct, the bit patterns are being received, the bit patterns are being distorted, and it's a really great help for fault finding.
So this will be taken away and integrated with the equipment so far.
One of Maurice Wilkes' students, Sandy Douglas, working on his PhD, came up with a novel use for EDSAC.
One of the demonstration programs written by Sandy Douglas was the Noughts and Crosses program. And the way he presented information to the player of the game was on this middle screen, which contains the contents of a whole memory tank, he could set the various bits, the ones and zeros, in the 568 digits that are there. He could set those to show an image on this screen. In a way, it's a bit like a display screen of a modern computer. He could set an image, very crude image on here, showing the playing area of a noughts and crosses game, the 9 cells and the vertical and cross lines, and either zeros or crosses in the 9 cells. And by suitable programming, he could make it show the image and show how the game was progressing with the noughts and the crosses being gradually put into the playing area.
The press trumpeted this seemingly trivial use of EDSAC, but as it turned out, maybe they were right. It was one of the world's first video games,